The dust whipped across Lillian Anderson's face as she stood defiantly before the burned remains of her father's ranch house, her golden brown hair dancing wildly in the wind like a flame refusing to be extinguished. It was 1875 in the harsh territory of Wyoming, and at 22 years old, she'd just become the sole owner of the Broken Arrow Ranch, what was left of it, anyway. "Miss Anderson," Sheriff Thompson said, removing his hat respectfully, "I understand your determination, but there ain't a woman in the territory who's managed to run a cattle operation alone. Your pa's debts are substantial. Selling is your best option." Lillian's jaw tightened. "My father built this ranch from nothing. I won't dishonor his memory by selling it to the first vulture who circles," the sheriff sighed. "The bank's giving you 30 days. After that, they'll take everything." After the sheriff departed, Lillian collapsed onto the porch steps, her fingers tracing the worn wood her father had laid with his own hands 15 years ago. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. Crying wouldn't save the Broken Arrow. She was still sitting there when hoofbeats approached from the western trail. A tall figure on horseback materialized through the dust, leading a small herd of cattle. As he drew closer, Lillian recognized Quentin Redfield, owner of the neighboring Rocking R Ranch. Quentin dismounted with the fluid grace that came from a lifetime in the saddle. At 28, he was already one of the most successful ranchers in the county, with a reputation for fair dealing and hard work. His dark hair was pushed back under his wide-brimmed hat, and his face was weathered by sun and wind, giving him a rugged handsomeness that Lillian had always pretended not to notice. "Miss Anderson," he greeted, tipping his hat. His eyes, blue as a summer sky, took in the charred remains of the main house. "I heard about the fire and your father. My condolences." "Thank you, Mr. Redfield," Lillian replied stiffly. He gestured to the cattle behind him. "I brought these over. They're from your herd wandered onto my property during the commotion." "That's very kind of you." Quentin shifted his weight. "Word is the bank's breathing down your neck." Lillian's spine straightened. "Word travels fast. It's a small county," he acknowledged. "They're saying you plan to run this place yourself." "They're right." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Most would say that's impossible. Most would be wrong." Quentin studied her for a long moment. "Your pa was a good man, taught me a few things when I was getting started." He paused. "I'd like to help." Lillian's eyes narrowed. "I'm not interested in charity, Mr. Redfield." "It's not charity I'm offering, it's a partnership." "Partnership?" Lillian echoed skeptically. "I've got men to spare and experience you need." "You've got land that borders my best grazing areas. We could combine forces for the summer drive, split the profits. Might be enough to keep the bank happy." Lillian crossed her arms. "And what do you get out of this arrangement?" Quentin shrugged. "Access to your north pastures would save me a 20-mile detour to get my herd to market, and I've been wanting to expand. If this works out, maybe we could discuss a more permanent arrangement." "I'm not selling," she said firmly. "Did I mention buying?" His eyes held hers. "I said partnership, Miss Anderson. I respect what your father built here. I'm not looking to take it from you." Lillian studied him, searching for deceit, but found only straightforward honesty in his gaze. Still, she hesitated. Accepting help felt like admitting defeat. "Think on it," Quentin said, mounting his horse. "Offer stands, but the cattle drive leaves in 2 weeks with or without the Broken Arrow brand." He tipped his hat again and turned his horse. "Mr. Redfield," Lillian called after him. He paused, looking back. "I'll consider it." His smile reached his eyes this time. "That's all I ask, Miss Anderson." After Quentin rode away, Lillian walked the property, taking stock of what remained. The bunkhouse had been spared the fire, as had the barn and corrals. Most of the hands had already left, seeking work elsewhere after her father's death. Only old Pete, the ranch foreman who'd been with her father since before she was born, remained loyal. "Pete," she said, finding him repairing fence posts, "what do you know about Quentin Redfield?" Pete straightened, rubbing his lower back. "Quentin, good man, fair to his workers, pays on time, knows his cattle." He squinted at her. Why you asking? Lillian explained Quentin's proposal. Pete nodded thoughtfully. Your pa would have considered it, he said finally. Times are hard. Bank won't care if you're a woman or a man if you can't make your payments. That night, Lillian slept in the bunkhouse, her father's account book spread around her. The numbers didn't lie. Without help, the broken arrow would be lost within the month. The next morning, she rode to the rocking R. The ranch house was modest but well-maintained, with a large barn and several corrals filled with horses. She found Quentin in one of them, working with a spirited bay colt. He looked up as she approached, surprise evident in his expression. Miss Anderson, wasn't expecting you so soon. I've made my decision, Lillian said without preamble. I accept your offer of partnership for the cattle drive, but I have conditions. Quentin's lips quirked. I'm listening. I want to be involved in every decision. I need to learn, not just watch from the sidelines. And I want everything in writing: profit splits, expenses, responsibilities. Seems reasonable, Quentin agreed, leaning on the corral fence. Anything else? Yes, when this is over, regardless of outcome, the broken arrow remains mine alone. Quentin held out his hand. You drive a hard bargain, Miss Anderson. We have a deal. Lillian took his hand, surprised by the warmth and strength in his grasp. Something passed between them in that moment, respect, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. The following days were a flurry of activity. Cattle had to be rounded up, counted, and prepared for the drive. The remaining broken arrow hands were supplemented by rocking R cowboys. Supplies were gathered, chuck wagons prepared. Lillian threw herself into the work, determined to prove herself capable. She rose before dawn each day, riding out with the men to gather strays. Her muscles ached from hours in the saddle, and her fair skin burned despite the wide-brimmed hat she wore, but she never complained. Quentin watched her with growing admiration, though they often butted heads. Lillian's stubbornness was legendary. She questioned his methods, argued over routes, and insisted on doing things her own way. Miss Anderson, Quentin said one evening as they pored over maps, has anyone ever told you you're the most stubborn woman in the Wyoming Territory? Lillian didn't look up from the map. Only those who don't know me well, those who do call me impossible. Quentin laughed, a rich sound that made something flutter in Lillian's chest. Your stubbornness might just be your greatest strength. I've seen men with less determination lose everything. Is that a compliment, Mr. Redfield? His eyes met hers, serious now. It is. This life isn't for the faint of heart. You need that fire to survive out here. The night before the drive was set to begin, a celebration was held at the rocking R. Lanterns hung from trees, casting golden light over tables laden with food. A fiddle player and a man with a banjo provided music, and despite the hard work ahead, spirits were high. Lillian stood at the edge of the gathering, watching the cowboys dance and laugh. She felt oddly out of place, not quite one of them, yet no longer the sheltered rancher's daughter she'd once been. Not enjoying the festivities, Quentin appeared beside her, offering a cup of punch. It's not that, Lillian said, accepting the drink. I'm just nervous about tomorrow. That's natural. First drives are always the hardest. She looked up at him. Were you nervous on your first drive? Terrified, he admitted with a grin. Pretended I wasn't, of course. Men are fools that way. At least you're honest about it. I try to be. He hesitated, then held out his hand. Would you care to dance, Miss Anderson? The question caught her off guard. I don't think that would be proper, Mr. Redfield. We're business partners now. Surely one dance is acceptable between associates. Before she could answer, they were interrupted by a commotion at the ranch entrance. A group of riders approached, led by a well-dressed man Lillian recognized as Harold Bentley, representative of the Wyoming Cattle Association and one of the most powerful men in the territory. Redfield. Bentley called out, dismounting. Heard you were having a little gathering before your drive. Quentin's expression cooled. Mr. Bentley, what brings you out this way? Business, my boy, always business. Bentley's gaze fell on Lillian. And Miss Anderson, I was sorry to hear about your father. Such a tragedy. Thank you, Mr. Bentley, Lillian replied cautiously. I understand you're joining forces with Redfield here for the drive. Bentley's smile didn't reach his eyes. Brave decision considering your inexperience. The Broken Arrow and Rocking R will do well together, Quentin said firmly. Perhaps, Bentley conceded. But the trail's dangerous this year. Rustlers are active near the Snake River crossing, and the market's uncertain. Might be better to sell now, Miss Anderson, while your property still holds value. Lillian stiffened. I've no intention of selling, Mr. Bentley. Reconsider, Bentley pressed. My offer is generous, more than fair for a woman in your position. Her answer was clear enough, Quentin interjected. Bentley's smile thinned. I see. Well, I hope your partnership proves fruitful. Good evening. As Bentley and his men rode away, Lillian turned to Quentin. He seemed rather interested in my ranch. Bentley's been buying up small ranches all across the territory, Quentin explained. He's building an empire. Your north pasture would connect two of his largest holdings. That explains his persistence, Lillian murmured. He's approached me 3 times since my father died. Quentin's expression darkened. Be careful, Lillian. Bentley doesn't like being denied. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent an unexpected warmth through her. The cattle drive began at dawn the next morning. 2,000 head of cattle combining the Broken Arrow and Rocking R herds stretched across the plains in a moving sea of horns and hides. 15 cowboys, including Quentin and Lillian, would guide them over 300 miles to the railhead at Cheyenne. The first days were grueling but uneventful. Lillian quickly proved her worth, working as hard as any man. Though some of the cowboys had initially grumbled about taking orders from a woman, her competence and determination gradually earned their respect. Quentin often rode beside her, offering advice without being condescending. They developed an easy rhythm, each learning to anticipate the other's thoughts and actions. In the evenings around the campfire, Lillian found herself drawn to his stories of past drives and the early days of his ranch. How did you get started? She asked one night as they sat slightly apart from the others. You couldn't have been much older than I am now. Quentin poked at the fire with a stick. I was 23, came west with nothing but a horse, a gun, and more confidence than sense. Worked as a hand for 3 years, saved every penny. He smiled at the memory. Started with 50 acres and 20 head of cattle, nearly lost it all that first winter. What saved you? Stubbornness, he said, his eyes finding hers. Refused to give up even when everyone said I should. Lillian felt a connection in that moment, a recognition of the same fire that burned within her. My father used to say my stubbornness would be either my salvation or my downfall. And what do you think it will be? She considered the question. Both, probably, often in the same day. Quentin laughed, and Lillian found herself laughing with him, the sound strange to her own ears after weeks of grief and worry. A week into the drive, disaster struck. They were crossing a narrow valley when a sudden thunderstorm rolled in. Lightning spooked the cattle, triggering a stampede. The herd scattered in all directions, many heading toward a steep ravine. Head them off. Quentin shouted over the thunder, spurring his horse toward the lead steers. Lillian rode hard, rain pelting her face as she maneuvered her horse alongside the panicked cattle. She managed to turn a large group away from the ravine, but as she did, her horse stepped in a prairie dog hole and went down hard. Lillian was thrown clear, landing with a jarring impact that knocked the breath from her lungs. She rolled to avoid the hooves of the remaining cattle, mud splattering her as the animals thundered past. When she finally caught her breath and struggled to her feet, she saw Quentin dismounting nearby, his face pale with concern. Are you hurt? He demanded, grasping her shoulders. I'm fine, Lillian insisted, though her side ached fiercely. My horse, lame, but he'll live. Quentin's hands moved to her face, tilting it up to examine a cut on her cheek. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, she pointed out, suddenly aware of how close he stood, of the warmth of his hands on her skin. For a heartbeat, something shifted in his expression. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. Come on, You can ride with me until we get back to camp." It took 2 days to round up the scattered cattle. They lost 30 head to the ravine and another dozen to injury, but it could have been much worse. Lillian worked alongside the men despite her bruised ribs, refusing special treatment. That night, she sat by the fire rubbing liniment into her sore muscles when Quentin joined her. "You should rest tomorrow," he suggested. "Let yourself heal." Lillian shook her head. "I'm fine. We can't afford to be short-handed." "That stubborn streak again," Quentin observed, but his tone was admiring rather than critical. "I've been thinking about something, Lillian." The use of her first name no longer surprised her. Somewhere along the trail, formalities had fallen away between them. "What's that?" she asked. "When you were thrown today, I realized how much I've come to." He paused, searching for words, "to value your partnership." Lillian felt a flutter of disappointment, though she wasn't sure what she'd expected him to say. "It's been beneficial for both our ranches." "That's not what I mean." Quentin's voice dropped lower. "I've come to value you, Lillian, your courage, your determination. Your stubbornness," she supplied with a small smile. His eyes met hers, firelight reflecting in their depths. "Your stubbornness is your strength, and sometimes I think it might be mine too." Before she could respond, one of the cowboys called Quentin away to deal with a sick steer, leaving Lillian to ponder his words and the warmth they'd kindled inside her. The drive continued, and with each passing day, the connection between Lillian and Quentin deepened. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking the way he sat a horse, how he spoke to his men with respect, the rare but wonderful sound of his laughter. They were 3 days from Cheyenne, when trouble found them again. They'd made camp for the night when Pete rode in frantically from his watch position. "Riders coming," he warned. "Dozen or more moving fast." Quentin immediately ordered the men to positions around the camp and heard. "Could be nothing," he told Lillian, "but be ready." It wasn't nothing. The riders emerged from the darkness, guns drawn. Lillian recognized Bentley's foreman at their head. "Evening, Redfield," the foreman called out. "We're here for your cattle." "These cattle aren't for taking," Quentin replied calmly, though his hand rested on his holstered pistol. "Move along, Jackson," Jackson smirked. "Mr. Bentley sends his regards, says if Miss Anderson won't sell her land willingly, perhaps she'll reconsider when she has no cattle to run on it." Lillian stepped forward. "Mr. Bentley doesn't intimidate me, should," Jackson retorted. "Man's used to getting what he wants, one way or another." Tension crackled in the air. Quentin's cowboys were outnumbered, but they stood firm. Just as it seemed violence was inevitable, the sound of more hoofbeats approached from the east. Sheriff Thompson rode into view with a posse of 6 men. "What's going on here, Jackson?" The foreman's confidence faltered. "Just having a conversation, Sheriff." "Looks more like you're fixing to rustle cattle," Thompson observed. "Mr. Bentley know you're using his name for thieving," Jackson scowled. "This ain't over, Redfield." "You neither, Anderson." He wheeled his horse around, and his men followed. After they'd gone, Sheriff Thompson explained that he'd received word of planned rustling activities and had been patrolling the likely routes. "Seems you two have made an enemy," he remarked. "Bentley's used to getting his way," Quentin said grimly. That night, neither Lillian nor Quentin could sleep. They sat together away from the sleeping cowboys, voices low. "What if he tries again?" Lillian worried. "We're still days from Cheyenne." "We'll be ready," Quentin assured her. "Once we reach the railhead and sell the cattle, Bentley will have lost his leverage." Lillian nodded, but anxiety still gnawed at her. "I never thought running a ranch would involve so many fights." "That's the West," Quentin said. "Land, water, cattle, everything's worth fighting for out here." "And what are you fighting for, Quentin?" The question hung in the air between them. Quentin's gaze held hers, something unspoken passing between them. "Once it was just the ranch," he said finally, "building something that was mine, something that would last." He reached out, tentatively touching her hand. "Now I'm not so sure that's enough anymore." Lillian's heart quickened. "What would be enough?" Instead of answering, Quentin leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But Lillian found herself responding, her hand lifting to his cheek. When they parted, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't plan this," he murmured. "Didn't expect to feel this way." "Neither did I," Lillian admitted. "I was so focused on saving the ranch I didn't consider that you might find something else worth fighting for," she nodded, a smile touching her lips. "My father would say I'm being impulsive." "And stubborn," Quentin added with a smile of his own. "Always that." They reached Cheyenne without further incident. The cattle sold for a better price than expected, enough to pay off Lillian's debts and leave a modest profit for both ranches. As they sat in the hotel restaurant celebrating their success, Quentin seemed preoccupied. "Something's troubling you," Lillian observed. "I've been thinking about the future," he admitted. "About what happens when we return home." Lillian felt a pang of uncertainty. "We go back to our separate ranches, I suppose. Is that what you want?" She hesitated. "What's the alternative?" Quentin reached across the table, taking her hand. "The partnership doesn't have to end with the drive. Our ranches together would be stronger than either one alone." "A business proposition?" Lillian asked, uncertain of his meaning. "No," Quentin said firmly, "not just business." He took a deep breath. "I'm asking if you might consider a more permanent partnership, between us, not just our ranches." Lillian's heart skipped. "Quentin Redfield, are you proposing to me in a hotel restaurant after a cattle drive?" A flush crept up his neck. "I suppose I am. Not very romantic, is it?" "On the contrary," Lillian said, squeezing his hand. "It might be the most romantic thing I've ever experienced." "Is that a yes?" "It's a I need time to think," she clarified. "This is sudden and I've only just secured my independence. I'm not sure I'm ready to give it up." Disappointment flickered across Quentin's face, but he nodded. "I understand. Take all the time you need." The journey home was quieter, the easy companionship between them now complicated by unresolved feelings. When they reached the point where their trails diverged, Quentin reined in his horse. "I meant what I said in Cheyenne," he told her. "But I won't press you for an answer. You know where to find me when you're ready." Lillian watched him ride away, conflicting emotions churning within her. She wanted to call him back, to accept his proposal on the spot, but something held her back, that same stubborn pride that had driven her to save her ranch against all odds. 2 weeks passed. Lillian threw herself into rebuilding, using her profits to hire workers to reconstruct the main house and repair fences. She visited the bank and paid off her father's debts in full, savoring the manager's surprised expression. But at night, alone in the bunkhouse that had become her temporary home, she found herself thinking of Quentin, his steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he'd valued her determination instead of seeing it as a flaw. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in golds and purples, Pete joined her. "House is coming along nice," the old foreman commented. "It is," Lillian agreed. "Should be ready to move in before winter." Pete nodded, silent for a moment before saying, "Been awful quiet around here without Redfield stopping by." Lillian gave him a sharp look. "He has his own ranch to run." "True enough." Pete rolled a cigarette, taking his time. "Funny thing, though. Man rides 15 miles every day just to look at his fence line where it borders your north pasture." "Does he now?" Hum. "Mighty interested in that fence all of a sudden." Pete lit his cigarette, the match flaring in the gathering dusk. "Your pa once told me the hardest part of ranching wasn't the work or the weather or even the money. It was knowing when to stand firm and when to bend." "Are you saying I'm being too stubborn, Pete?" The old man shrugged. "Not my place to say, Miss Lillian. Just thinking out loud about fences and such." After Pete ambled away, Lillian remained on the porch long after darkness fell. The next morning, she saddled her horse and rode north. She found Quentin exactly where Pete had suggested, inspecting a stretch of fence that couldn't possibly need such frequent attention. He straightened when he saw her approaching, hope and wariness warring in his expression. "Lillian," he greeted her, "this is a surprise." She dismounted, coming to stand before him. "Is it? I hear you've developed quite an interest in this particular section of fence." A flush colored his cheeks. It needed repairs. For 2 weeks straight, "It's an important fence," he defended weakly. Lillian couldn't help but smile. "I've been thinking about your proposal." And his voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I value my independence," she began. "The broken arrow is my legacy from my father. I won't give it up." Quentin nodded, disappointment evident despite his attempt to hide it. "I understand." "No, I don't think you do," Lillian continued. "I won't give up my ranch, but that doesn't mean I can't accept a partner. A true partner's someone who respects my strength and my stubbornness." Hope kindled in Quentin's eyes. "Someone like me, exactly like you." She took a step closer. "You said my stubbornness was my strength, but you were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "It's not your strength too," Lillian said, reaching for his hand. "You have your own, your patience. Your fairness. Your ability to see value in a woman who most men would dismiss as impossible." Quentin's fingers intertwined with hers. "Does this mean you're accepting my proposal?" "It means I'm offering a counter-proposal. Equal partners in everything: life, love, and ranching." The broken arrow and the rocking R remain separate on paper, but operated as one. And neither of us has to give up our independence to gain a companion. "That's quite a negotiation, Miss Anderson," Quentin said, pulling her closer. "Take it or leave it, Mr. Redfield." His smile was answer enough, but he sealed the agreement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of partnership. 1 year later, the newly constructed Anderson-Redfield house stood proud on a rise between the two ranches. Larger than either original home, it symbolized the union of not just two people, but two legacies. On their first anniversary, Quentin presented Lillian with a brand new sign for the main gate. It featured both ranch brands, the broken arrow and the rocking R, intertwined as one. "Do you know what I thought the first time I met you?" Quentin asked as they stood admiring the sign. "That I was the most stubborn woman in Wyoming territory," Lillian suggested with a smile. "That too," he admitted. "But mainly I thought you were the strongest person I'd ever met. And every day since then has proven me right." Lillian leaned into his embrace, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder. "We make quite a pair, don't we? Your patience and my stubbornness." "Perfect balance," Quentin agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Wouldn't have it any other way." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they both loved, Lillian reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From adversaries to allies to partners in every sense, their story was woven into the very fabric of the wild land around them, a testament to the strength found in stubborn hearts and the love that flourishes when they finally meet their match.